So recently I've seen a good amount of content creators and gamers share an opinion that I thought was honestly a hot take, but I realize is actually pretty common. From manly reviews to internet pit stops, even to those 4 goobers on the official podcast. The sentiment is shared that video game graphics don't matter. And at first I disagreed incredibly, but now I'm a full-blown radical anti-graphican, down with fidelity. In fact, I'm so anti-graphics that I'll downgrade my favorite video game of all time, Red Dead Redemption 2. The story and writing is so good that the graphics are completely unnecessary, see? You know, this actually works out perfectly. Walking back a statement was on my to-do list today. One day, a month or two ago, I was listening to the official podcast and I heard them say this.
Like, graphics don't matter. They really don't. If you make a good game,
to dummies.
They matter for fucking idiots who want shiny, sparkly spectacle. But if you make a good game or an interesting game, it really doesn't matter how it looks.
What the fuck are you talking about? This was what really started this video's creation. I'd heard this sentiment a bit in the past, but this is what sent me down the rabbit hole. Researching why people have this opinion because I do not share this sentiment at all. I'm not saying that it's wrong if graphical fidelity isn't a priority for you. I totally understand why most people, including myself, prioritize gameplay. But to say that graphics don't matter is kind of an ignorant statement, and wildly underplays how crucial graphics can be to a game's longevity. I really want to break down why graphics are important and should be appreciated. And also I want to address some concerns that people have and debate the idea that high-quality graphics worsen or even ruin video games. Now, I will be fair and say that graphics aren't the most important thing, and that you can definitely make a great game with subpar graphical fidelity. Some examples of this are hand-drawn games like the stylized and very difficult Cuphead and Super Meat Boy, the highly anticipated Mouse game, and the endlessly replayable Hades. These games' visuals, to my understanding, really can only look worse if the screen you're playing on has horrible resolution, but are firmly cemented in their own style, working around graphical limitations. Other examples are games like Shovel Knight, Jump King, and Hotline Miami, which all use their graphical limitations to their benefit by taking the game in a pixelated 16-bit direction. Recent Mario games and some Zelda games that go back as early as 2002 use models crafted in a cartoon style to make the games more timeless despite their low polygon count. Which in hindsight was a very good call, considering that you can run the original Doom on a calculator, but smoke comes out of my Nintendo Switch when I try to play Mortal Kombat 1. Telltale games are made to look more like a playable comic book, so top-of-the-line graphical quality really isn't necessary for what they're going for. And I do think Arkham Asylum and Arkham City would look worse than they already do if they upgraded the graphics. But that's mainly because the character designs are really made specifically for this more action figure sort of style. Like when the original Arkham suit is upscaled in Arkham Knight, it honestly looks more goofy than intimidating, as opposed to the game it originates from. And then there are some games like Kingdom Hearts that really benefit from releasing during the PlayStation 2 console generation. Its sharp edges and choppy lines do just enough to successfully pull off what the game needs to be, while also providing the player with fond memories and nostalgia to go back to in the current year. Part of the reason it's so fun to play this game now is because seeing its visuals is like looking into a time capsule that was buried back in '02. And it's awfully convenient that this game is now 21 years old, considering you need a bottle of Tylenol and a shit ton of alcohol to figure out the story. So yes, graphics alone don't matter enough to make or break a game. But I don't think any aspect of video games at all does that alone. Games by Supermassive have unabashedly shitty gameplay, but that doesn't make them bad games. I'm not a fan of a few games in the Dark Pictures anthology. For example, all of them, but the poor quality gameplay doesn't ruin the quarry because it's held up by its cast, graphical fidelity, and Raimi-isms. I really don't think anything, even gameplay, makes or breaks a game. So saying that the games I previously listed are unaffected by graphical quality doesn't exactly discount how important graphics truly are. Some games you wouldn't expect are surprisingly reliant on graphics and benefit from them much more than most people realize. One of them, oddly enough, is the Kingdom Hearts franchise. One of the best things about Kingdom Hearts 3 is that it took so long to come out. Square Enix has released a metric shit ton of Kingdom Hearts games. But looking at just the mainline releases, Kingdom Hearts 2 took 3 years to come out, and Kingdom Hearts 3 took a very reasonable 14 years. Now I know that may seem like a long amount of time. A kid born the same day Kingdom Hearts 2 released wouldn't play the next game until they were a freshman in high school. But you gotta remember, taking 14 years to make a game is seen as crunch culture in Bethesda's eyes. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Todd Howard for announcing my grandkid's favorite game before my voice had dropped. But since there was such a huge gap between Kingdom Hearts 2 and 3, instead of seeing this franchise's awkward phase, we went straight to the glow-up. Yes, Kingdom Hearts was made for the PS2, but we get the best of both worlds this way. No matter which of the 3 games you play, you get either a charming blast from the past or a stunning playable Pixar movie. If this series was made in collaboration with any company other than Disney, they might have dropped the ball a bit when translating these anime-style character designs into the 3D space. But since Disney has been making great-looking models since 2006, they nailed the graphical upgrade. Another game you wouldn't expect to visually benefit from the progression of video game graphics is Splatoon. They have goofed up in the past really bad with Splatoon Girl in particular. Like, look at how shitty this is. They upgraded her so much that she looks like a flat PNG in the spin-off. I think it's called Personality or something. But in the main series, there is a noticeable, albeit less drastic, spike in visual quality. I'm not trying to dog on the original Splatoon. You know it's a good game if Square Enix tries to rip it off. But it's just a bit dated since it came out in 2015. Because of its limitations, the colors, which may be the biggest part of this game, are a little flat and don't pop as much as they should. But when you look at Splatoon 3, it looks much better, with the great lighting and reflection systems that make the ink clash much more against the white surfaces and look much more wet. And again, to mention it really quickly, Mortal Kombat 1 was a highlight for me this year, but it also came with a lot of criticism on the Switch release. Don't get me wrong, I think this looks like shit too. I'd much rather play the version that isn't a visual mess. But I'm the one saying graphics matter. I just think it's funny that the people who say graphics don't matter and it's all about gameplay are the same crowd that turn around and call this unplayable. Okay, so I'm about to ruin my reputation and whatever credibility I have as a reviewer, but I'm sorry, I have to give a compliment to this. I'm expecting a cease and desist letter from Nintendo at this point, because the most important rule of being a Nintendo fan is that you must shit on Star Fox Zero at every possible opportunity. But to be fair, only 2 Star Foxes live in my head. The high-definition one, and the one whose nose looks like you can cut a diamond with it. I do love this classic design, mainly because of nostalgia, but I really would love to see Nintendo take another crack at this IP in the same vein as the new Ratchet & Clank series. Especially because Fox's design has been a huge improvement, even back in 2008 when I first saw him in Super Smash Bros. Brawl. So to preface, the last game I want to talk about that relies on graphics isn't quite like the others where it might be easy to miss. I think I might just be a dumbass. 2020's Doom Eternal looks surprisingly incredible, or at least it's surprising to me. It might be because I played this game back when it released on PlayStation 4, and only realized how good it looks when playing the PS5 version. But when you stop moving and actually take a look at the in-game models, reflections, and textures, it is wildly impressive. I didn't watch many reviews about the game when it came out, but if memory serves, not many people talked about how visually impressive this game is. I think the reason it flies below the radar for me is because the game is very movement-oriented. It's much harder than its predecessor, Doom 2016, and therefore you have to move much more and think quickly, being light on your feet. So in this game, when it's most impressive in its set pieces, you can't ever stop and admire the technical showcases that this game has to offer. Alright, we've gone through some games that aren't held back by their technical limitations, and some games that are surprisingly reliant on their visual performance. But now to show you just how important graphics are, let's talk about some games where that's their main point of purchase. And that's not always a bad thing. But when we get to the games where it is a bad thing, you might notice a pattern in genre. If you've watched some of my previous content, you might notice that I'm kind of PlayStation's little bitch boy meat writer. But it's not because I'm a PlayStation fan and therefore I like their games. No, I'm a PlayStation fan because I really like their games and think they're really high quality. Even this shill has limits and won't follow a gaming company blindly. All of this is to say that even though it looks like I'm shilling out, I truly respect the team behind Gran Turismo, making graphical quality a selling point for their product. The main reason why is because Gran Turismo isn't a very typical racing game like Dirt, Mario Kart, or Need for Speed. It aims to be a racing simulator that emulates realism as much as possible. Weight, tire grip, materials, balance, and so much more goes into how your car drives. This is incredibly frustrating for me, but it is very difficult to successfully drift in this game. The most optimal way to drive is to stick to your line and manually slow down when making turns. And since the goal behind Gran Turismo is to play as realistic as possible, making it look as realistic as possible makes sense and is on brand. So I respect and appreciate it. Forza is a bit of a different story. I played very little of the PS2 Gran Turismo games as a little kid because when my dad let me try them out, it was way too difficult for me to have fun. The only Forza game that I've ever played was Forza 3 on the Xbox 360. To be fair, I was much older at the time, but I was actually able to have fun on that game and sink hours into it. Some of my most fun memories I have as a kid was racing backwards on an oval track with my friend and getting into devastating car wrecks with CPU racers. So given what little I've played of the franchise as a whole, I'd imagine that Forza doesn't play nearly as realistically as Gran Turismo. So it isn't as fitting, but given the fact that I don't really know what I'm talking about here, I'll give it a pass. One of the most irritating games that relies on graphics way too much is NBA 2K. I do want to say that I understand the appeal to NBA 2K games. After all, I was 2K's bitch back in 2016. Basketball games are always good fun to pick up and play for a bit if you're a fan of the sport. When I got my PS5, it was bundled with Miles Morales and NBA 2K21, the first of these games I'd played in a long time. So I was actually pretty excited to play the latest installment of the franchise. I have no issue buying the latest 2K every 5 years or so. The problem is that these games are a subscription service. I'm not gonna fucking pay $70 a year to play the same game with the new UI, new roster, and better graphics. Especially since your My Player isn't transferable across different games. And some people pay way more than $70 every year because they buy VC so they can upgrade their character and actually have fun faster. I'm not condemning anyone who buys the new 2K game every year. If you're content with what you're getting and can afford to, more power to you. I just wish there was more to them. And that's not just NBA. Every yearly sports franchise has this problem, like Madden, WWE, MLB, and FIFA. WWE did skip a year so they could better revamp the game's mechanics and systems, but every trailer for the IPs I listed are all about who's on the cover this year, how realistic the players are, and how sweaty they can get. I'm not gonna comment on the game itself because it's not out yet, and its graphical quality and realism is a bit controversial. Unrecord's whole selling point is that it's incredibly realistic and aims to perfectly emulate police body cam footage. I'm not against making graphics look this good or using them to try and replicate reality, but I'm not sure recreating police body cam footage is the most appropriate way to go about it. I don't really know yet if the studio behind Unrecord took it a bit too far, but I'm all for using graphical fidelity like this, but in a much more appropriate setting. Lastly, Detroit Become Human is an excellent case where the incredible graphics are a large selling point in a good way. I highly doubt that this game was meant to be a graphical showcase first and foremost. David Cage is not the best writer in the world, and he takes his stories in odd directions. But based on what Quantic Dream has put out in the past and the final product itself, it's pretty clear to see that the development of the characters, as well as the story, or ever-changing stories, were the main focal point of this game. In games like this, whether it be Quantic Dream, Supermassive, or Telltale, gameplay almost always takes a back seat and is reduced to walking sims, quick-time events, and multiple-choice questions. So since Detroit's gameplay isn't as complex or innovative as other video games, they really were able to put more effort into how great this game looks. Given its genre, they aren't sacrificing anything unexpected for its visuals. Detroit is also a good example of when a game has great graphics that masterfully accentuates its art direction. To me, state-of-the-art graphics with no style or art direction is like a toddler sketching with high-quality materials, or a bad singer performing in a room with great acoustics. Great graphics can be used really well, but if you don't know what you're doing with that kind of fidelity, you're gonna get something like Forspoken. But Detroit's graphics are really brought to life by the icy cold bluish hues, the futuristic architecture, and the physical appearance of the super advanced technology. Another video game that's a good example of graphics and art direction meshing together flawlessly is Death Stranding. I haven't played much of this game. I dropped it after I got into the combat, which is honestly very lame and basic, but I really enjoy this sort of zen walking sim gameplay, and slowly making upgrades and getting community help to make traversal easier. I'm not the biggest fan of how Civilization looks in this setting, with the architecture and interior design being a bit of a drag, but the open fields of grass and moss and the gray rocky mountains clash against this cold, washed out sky, while also being drab enough to fit into the style. It reminds me of a desolate and abandoned Asgard from God of War Ragnarok, a game that also fits in this category. I won't stay on it for too long since I already talked about this game a bit, but I think Doom Eternal's high fidelity makes the cartoonishly graphic violence look so much grosser and satisfying. Watching chunks of meat fly off your enemy's body as a form of a health bar is so cool. I know I sound sadistic talking about how awesome it is that it looks like I'm really pulling a Cacodemon's eye out, but come on, it's Doom. You get a pass with this franchise in Mortal Kombat. I want to clear something up really quickly because I don't want to get any shit for this. I like hard video games. I think it's really fun to bang my head against a brick wall as fast as possible and try over and over until I finally win. That's why I love Crash Bandicoot, why I'm enjoying Armored Core 6, and why I had an amazingly fun time replaying Spider-Man 2 on Ultimate Difficulty. Every time I died, I respawned and tried that phase again within seconds, and enjoyed every minute of it, never getting frustrated because I love the gameplay and the challenge. I don't like difficulty where whenever I lose in a boss fight, I have to run back to the boss arena, possibly taking damage along the way, only to get my ass handed to me and have to run all the way back. So I did not play Elden Ring. I know it rightfully won Game of the Year last year, it was a big fucking deal. Casual gamers who never played a Souls game were talking about it at my job. I'm not really trying to gatekeep or anything, it's just that its release was that big of a deal. But I didn't play it because Souls-like games aren't my thing. I'm straight up not good enough at them to play them without getting super frustrated. But while I didn't actually play it, I watched my friends play it through share screen, and hot damn, it is a beautiful game. People bitched about it being a graphical downgrade from the Demon Souls remake that came out like 2.5 years prior, but that really isn't the best complaint because one is a remake, and one is completely original, and without comparing it to anything, Elden Ring looks fucking great. I particularly love the beaches of this game, the green meadows and ruins outside the giant walls, and how could I not talk about that big ass tree? It's beautiful, I want to take a bite out of it. And to finish this section off, I want to talk about a game that will come up again later, Batman Arkham Knight. Yes, the previous games did utilize a style that takes the focus off of their technical limitations, but hot damn, just look at how gorgeous Arkham Knight is. The high quality graphics are absolutely perfect for this game's dark and grimy Gotham City that's in a permanent state of raining. Arkham Knight's open world is so stunning, from the eerie brick and mortar orphanage, to the vibrant and neon lights, to Gotham's own discount Lady Liberty, who makes me feel a way that I'm ashamed of. I feel like Matt Reeves had to have used this game's Gotham as inspiration when making the Batman, because these are two of the best iterations of Gotham I've seen. It really shows how talented the Rocksteady team is when this game came out in 2015 and this chunk of shit came out last year. To give WB Montreal some credit though, this definitely isn't the worst version of Gotham I've seen. I've said it before on this channel and I'll say it again, at least Gotham Knights doesn't take place in Chicago in the broad daylight. Going back to what I said earlier, great graphics with no directions is like a novice painter using the best paints money can buy. But on the other hand, a game with great art direction with horrible graphics is like Vincent van Gogh using Crayola markers. Even though it's not optimal, I'm sure Van Gogh could have done some great things with Crayolas. One of my favorite sayings is that the enemy of creativity is resources. Because not only do you need resources to fuel your creativity, making it suck when you don't have any, but also because the more you have, the less you'll innovate and think outside the box. And that applies to video games like Shovel Knight, an indie game with very limited graphics. That game could probably run on a Super Nintendo, but due to the great art direction, the pixelated visuals are very welcome and fit the style like a glove. Unfortunately though, people often use this to say that graphics don't matter and throw it in the face of AAA companies. But that really couldn't be further from the truth. What people mean to say is that a game can succeed with retro-style graphics, and you don't have to make your game look super realistic. Because these games are some of the best examples of why graphics do matter. Undertale would look absolutely revolting in Ultra HD because it wasn't made for that. It is crucial to Undertale's visuals that it stays in old school graphics. It matters that I'm not looking at a photorealistic goat woman or a 3-foot-tall skeleton of a pop figure. Sometimes less is more, and that sentiment applies to lots of things. The main theme of God of War is 3 notes at a time. It's very simple, but it's still a great theme. And just because God of War is a simple theme that's really good, doesn't mean that complex themes are bad. Just like how games with simple graphics can be really good, but that doesn't mean graphics don't matter. I'm gonna be honest though, not everyone is Vincent van Gogh. Just because you have Crayola markers doesn't mean you're capable of using them in an innovative way. I've heard a lot of people say that the art direction for Firewatch is incredible and completely circumvents the need for great graphics. I think the people who say that really like the color orange. I really don't think that this game's art direction or style makes up for its graphics at all. There are times where you can barely tell what the hell you're looking at, and things just blend together. I am a bit colorblind, so it could just be a skill issue, but I really think upscaling the graphics just enough to not ruin the aesthetic would benefit this game's visuals a lot. A lot of the time, a game's only issue is that it doesn't graphically hold up, like Fallout New Vegas, Morrowind, or the original Final Fantasy VII. They really could be almost perfect. They have a great story, characters, gameplay, dialogue, mechanics, but they just look like shit in a toilet, dude. One of these games is 2007's BioShock. I'm not a big fan of the gameplay, but this game might have my favorite look of all time. I am in love with the Art Deco visuals and architecture and how it mixes with the underwater setting. This scene has one of the greatest establishing shots I've seen across all media. But, okay, this game's art direction is more than good enough to compensate for the game's 16-year-old graphics. but man, what I would give to see this scene remastered. I think that The Last of Us Part 1 Remake is another great example of a game that's only problem is that it came out a decade ago. The story, banger. The characters, banger. The writing, banger. The dialogue, banger. The gameplay, banger. The music, banger. The graphics, the gunplay, bang. One of my best friends played The Last of Us Remastered last year, and he said that the only thing keeping it from being a 10 out of 10 is that it hasn't aged too well, and I wholeheartedly agree. So I was very happy to hear back in 2021 that they were remaking the game and improving the only aspect that the original was lacking. I'll compare it to A New Hope. There definitely is novelty and enjoyment to be had watching the original 1977 version, but I feel like if you're gonna re-watch it or show it to someone for the first time, you'd want to put on the re-release that looks better. Unless you're one of those superfans that treats the who shot first debate like it's a presidential election. McClunky. Another problem I have with the graphics don't matter argument is the sentiment that realism fades, but an art style is timeless. Not really. Yeah, some realistic games don't hold up. Lara Croft looks like a peeled potato, but look at how the graphical jump between console generations has gotten smaller and smaller. Why do you think that is? I really think that it's because you can only look so realistic. You can't replicate reality better than perfectly, and soon video game developers will be doing it perfectly. At some point, graphics will plateau and emulate the real world damn near identically, which will become easier and easier for future consoles to process. Think of it in the progress of film. They started out crusty and black and white, and then slowly got better and better quality, to the point where now, capturing an image 1-to-1 is the industry standard. I feel like video games will get to that point, and games 30 years in the future will look just as real as games 50 years in the future. And it definitely won't replace indie 2D pixel games, just like HD cameras never replaced animation or black and white films. So eventually realistic graphics won't fade because you won't be able to get more realistic than 100%. I honestly think we're pretty close to, and we'll be seeing this pretty soon. You can still tell that The Last of Us Part 2 is a video game, but it looks so fucking good. And I doubt in 15 years, we'll be looking at Last of Us 2 the same way we look at Grand Theft Auto 4 or World at War today. One point people bring up when debating the importance of graphics that really annoys me is that the more time you spend on graphics, the less time you spend on other important features like gameplay or sometimes functionality. And to my understanding, that's kind of true. It's not like developers walk into the studio one week working on concept art, and the next they're assigned to work on the music. You can't really transfer manpower around like that. You can do that, however, by putting more money into hiring concept artists than musicians. But I'd imagine a lot of the budget is assigned at the beginning of the production, and that it would be much more difficult to hire someone new in the later stages of development to meet the deadline, rather than delaying the game. So since there isn't as much flexibility as you'd imagine, I'd say that instead of high graphical quality, improper time management and/or unrealistic deadlines are to blame for video games being buggy at launch. Especially when you consider that you can innovate and have groundbreaking graphical fidelity at the same time. Uncharted 4 and Arkham Knight are great examples of innovation, and they both hold up to this day visually, despite releasing in 2015 and 2016. This Batman game looks better than this Batman game that released 7 years later, and still managed to add a form of combat and traversal that was entirely new to the series. I know a lot of people hate the Batmobile, but love it or hate it, it wasn't something they just easily tossed in. And Uncharted 4 still looks great 7 years later. And you know what? Let's play a game real quick. While pulling off incredible and groundbreaking graphics, did Uncharted 4 A. add new vehicle driving and combat, B. feature the best chapter in the whole franchise, C. add a grappling hook to the climbing, or D. create set pieces that the Tomb Raider reboot series would later rip off? All of them. Naughty Dog did all of them, but the answer is C, the most important one. This modern game would drop from a 9 out of 10 to a 3 if it didn't have a grappling hook. So to wrap up this video, because I'm sure you're tired of hearing my voice by now, graphics are the Aquaman of the video game industry. They were a big deal back in the day, then people turned on them, and now reject their advancement, claiming they don't matter and are lame. Kind of the opposite of how we all knew the Amazing Spider-Man movies were shit, and now after No Way Home, everyone's pretending that they're good. Graphics can bring an art style to life, make a game look better even if they're lower quality, and they've sparked incredible innovation, even back in 1992 when they used real-life actors to make Mortal Kombat 1, or I guess just to make the original Mortal Kombat look more realistic. Good graphics can immerse you into a world, let you see some incredible sights, and can even be that missing piece that takes a beloved game and makes it a damn near perfect experience. So yes, video game graphics do matter. Fuck you, Charlie.